Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to do a deep dive into Chinese history.
Oh, fun.
Specifically, its conflicts and wars.
Oh, wow.
And we are using excerpts from a book called Eternal Struggles, The Warring History of China.
Okay.
And let me tell you, getting ready for this deep dive, it's been so eye-opening to see just how much conflict has really shaped this ancient civilization.
Yeah, a lot of people think of Chinese history as just this long, kind of unbroken chain of dynasties.
Right.
But the reality is much more tumultuous. Conflict and war are really kind of woven into the very fabric of China's story.
Absolutely. And the book really emphasizes this idea of cycles.
Yeah.
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 You see these periods of really powerful unified dynasties,
Mm.
and then it's followed by periods of fragmentation and just like tons of infighting.
Right.
It's a fascinating pattern.
Yeah, it is. And understanding this pattern is really crucial for understanding China's position in the world today. If we want to understand their ambitions and anxieties, now we need to know where they come from.
Yeah.
And that means going back centuries.
Okay, so let's go way back to the beginning.
Okay.
We're talking the earliest days of Chinese civilization.
Right.
We're talking the Xia Shang and early Zhou dynasties.
Right.
So this is 2070 to 256 BCE.
Okay.
What I think is so fascinating is that even then, power struggles were just a constant.
Yeah, even though the historical records from those early periods are kind of scarce,
Right.
we see evidence of this internal dissent and threats from outside.
Right.
Think about trying to establish a unified state in this vast territory with limited communication and infrastructure.
Yeah.
It was just a recipe for constant power struggles.
It makes you wonder, what it was really like back then.
I know.
You were talking about the legendary Xia dynasty.
Yeah.
Shrouded in mystery. Did they actually exist?
Right.
What was their society like?
The Shida dynasty is this historical puzzle with just missing pieces. We have hints and legends, but solid archaeological evidence is still debated.
Right.
But, whether they existed exactly as described in the legends or not, the fact that those stories still persist tells us something about just the enduring power of these origin myths in Chinese culture.
Okay, so let's move on to the spring and autumn period.
Okay.
This is from 771 to 476 BCE.
All right.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
So we have Zhou authority beginning to weaken,
Right.
and all these regional warlords start vying for control.
Yeah, this period is so pivotal because it lays the groundwork for the even more intense conflicts that are to come. Imagine the old orders crumbling.
Yeah.
Ambitious warlords are sensing opportunity.
Yeah.
New ideas about governance and warfare are emerging.
Right.
It's a recipe for chaos,
Yeah.
but also innovation.
Totally. And then things really explode with the Warring States period.
Oh, yeah.
475 to 221 BCE.
Yep.
7 major states constantly battling it out for supremacy.
Yeah.
This era is like a masterclass in military and political strategy.
Totally.
What kind of innovations in warfare were they developing during this time?
It was a period of intense military and technological development.
Yeah.
Think about it. When your survival depends on outmaneuvering your enemies,
Right.
you're going to come up with some pretty ingenious solutions.
Right.
So they developed advanced weaponry like the crossbow,
Okay.
which had greater accuracy and range than traditional bows.
Right.
They also refined siege warfare techniques.
Okay.
And developed complex spy networks to gather intelligence on their rivals.
It's like a real-life Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
With alliances constantly shifting and betrayals around every corner.
Yeah, and it's out of this chaos that this new concept emerges, the idea of a unified Chinese empire. Before this period, the idea of a single ruler controlling all of China wasn't really on the table.
Right.
The brutal realities of the warring states period made it clear that unification, however achieved, might be the only path to lasting peace and stability.
Okay, so tell me about the Qin dynasty.
Okay.
They were the ones that eventually emerged victorious from all this chaos, right?
No.
What made them so successful?
Well, the Qin dynasty is so fascinating because they were ruthless and ambitious,
Yeah.
but also incredibly effective. They were masters of legalism,
Okay.
which is this philosophy that emphasizes strict laws and harsh punishments.
Oh, wow.
And this allowed them to centralize power
Okay.
and
Yeah.
create a highly disciplined military force.
So they were kind of like the ultimate pragmatists.
Yeah.
They did what they had to do to unify China.
Right.
even if it meant resorting to some pretty brutal tactics.
Yeah, and their unification in 221 BCE was like a watershed moment
Okay.
in Chinese history.
Yeah.
Think about it. For the first time, the vast majority of China was under the control of a single emperor.
Wow.
And this laid the foundation for the imperial system that would dominate China for like the next 2 millennia.
It's amazing how they were able to bring such a vast and diverse territory under their control.
Yeah.
What happened after the Qin dynasty? Did their strict rule last?
Well, the Qin dynasty, despite its achievements,
Yeah.
was relatively short-lived.
Okay.
Their harsh rule and ambitious building projects like the Great Wall
Yeah.
led to widespread resentment and rebellion.
Okay.
And after the first emperor's death, the dynasty quickly crumbled.
It's almost like they sowed the seeds of their own destruction.
Right.
They were so focused on control and order that they didn't leave much room for, like, flexibility or adaptation.
That's a great point. Their legacy is complex.
Yeah.
On one hand, they unified China
Right.
and laid the groundwork for this imperial system.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, their harsh rule showed the dangers of unchecked power
Right.
and the importance of finding a balance between order and freedom.
So this is where we get the Han dynasty, right?
Yes.
They ruled from 206 BCE to 220 CE.
That's right.
What was their approach to ruling such a vast empire? Were they more successful than the Qin?
Well, they definitely learned from the mistakes of the Qin.
Hmm.
They understood that lasting power requires more than just military might.
Yeah.
It requires the support of the people.
Right.
So while they maintained a strong centralized government, they also embraced Confucianism as like a guiding philosophy.
Interesting. Confucianism emphasizes things like social harmony and respect for authority, right?
Yeah, and the importance of education.
Yeah.
It's a very different approach than the Qin's strict legalism.
Totally. So the Han saw the value in creating a society where people felt a sense of belonging,
Right.
shared purpose.
Yeah, they invested in education,
Okay.
promoted Confucian values,
Right.
and even established a system of civil service exams to select officials based on merit rather than just family connections.
Oh, wow. So they were aiming for a more balanced and stable society
Right.
rather than just imposing order through force.
Yeah, did this approach work?
Well, it sounds like it did to a large extent.
Yeah.
The Han Dynasty enjoyed a period of remarkable stability and prosperity lasting over 4 centuries.
That's right.
They expanded China's borders, secured vital trade routes like the Silk Road, and developed a sophisticated system of governance that would influence Chinese politics for centuries to come.
Right.
That's incredible, over 4 centuries of relative peace and prosperity.
Yeah.
They must have been doing something right.
Yeah, but even they couldn't escape the cycle of conflict entirely, could they?
Right. Even the most successful empires are vulnerable to both internal decay and external pressures, right?
Exactly.
What happened after the Han Dynasty collapsed?
Well, China entered a period of fragmentation and conflict known as the Three Kingdoms period.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of this.
Yeah, lasting from 220 to 280 CE.
Okay.
And this era is incredibly fascinating because it just captures the imagination.
Right.
It's a time of brilliant military strategists, shifting alliances, and epic battles.
It's no wonder it's become so legendary in Chinese culture. I mean, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms is one of the most famous works of Chinese literature.
It is.
It's been adapted into countless films,
It's
TV shows, video games, you name it.
Exactly. The novel romanticizes and dramatizes events.
Right.
But it also reflects the core values and ideals that have shaped Chinese society for centuries.
Okay.
Themes of loyalty, honor strategy, and the struggle for power.
Right.
These resonate deeply in Chinese culture even today.
So even though it was a time of chaos and conflict,
Yeah?
the Three Kingdoms period also left behind this rich legacy of stories and cultural influences.
Right.
Did China eventually unify again after this period?
It did, but it took centuries.
Wow.
The Sui dynasty managed to reunify China in 581 CE,
Okay.
but their rule was short-lived.
Okay.
They overextended themselves with ambitious military campaigns and ultimately fell to internal rebellions.
It's fascinating how this pattern just keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
A dynasty rises, establishes order, expands its power, but then internal pressures or external threats lead to its decline.
It's true.
It makes you wonder if there's something about the very nature of power
Right.
that makes it inherently unstable.
It's a question that has plagued philosophers and historians for centuries.
Yeah.
Is power inherently corrupting? Is there a way to create a system of governance that is both strong and flexible, stable and adaptable?
It's the age-old question.
Yeah, these are questions that the Chinese have grappled with throughout their history.
So who came after the Sui?
Okay.
Did China find a more sustainable model for imperial rule?
Well, the Sui dynasty, despite its flaws, laid the groundwork for the Tang dynasty,
Okay.
which ruled from 618 to 907 CE.
Right.
And the Tang is often considered like a golden age in Chinese history.
Okay, now we're talking a golden age.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the Tang. What made them so successful?
Well, the Tang rulers were skilled administrators and military commanders. They expanded China's territory, established a strong central government, and promoted trade and cultural exchange.
Mm-hmm.
This period saw a flourishing of art, literature, and technology.
So it wasn't just about military power.
Right.
They were also cultivating a vibrant and sophisticated culture.
Exactly.
What kind of cultural achievements are we talking about?
Well, think about it. This is the era of renowned poets like Li Bai and Du Fu,
Oh, wow.
whose works are still celebrated today.
Yeah.
It's a time of beautiful calligraphy, intricate ceramics, and advancements in printing technology.
Wow.
The Tang dynasty was a cultural powerhouse, and its influence spread throughout East Asia.
It sounds like a truly remarkable period.
It was.
But even golden ages don't last forever, do they?
No, they don't.
What led to the decline of the Tang?
Well, like many dynasties before them,
Yeah.
the Tang faced a combination of internal and external pressures.
Okay.
Internal rebellions, like the An Lushan Rebellion, weakened the central government and drained resources. They also faced challenges from powerful nomadic groups along their borders.
It seems like internal conflict was a recurring theme in Chinese history.
Yeah.
These rebellions were usually driven by political ambition,
Well,
economic inequality, or something else.
it was often a combination of factors.
Right.
Imagine living under a ruler who's perceived as corrupt or ineffective.
Yeah.
Imagine facing economic hardship or social injustice.
Right.
These conditions create fertile ground for rebellion,
Yeah.
especially in a society where the mandate of heaven dictates that a ruler's legitimacy is tied to their ability to govern effectively and justly.
Okay, the mandate of heaven.
Yes.
That's a key concept we haven't really touched on yet. Can
Right.
you explain what that is and how it impacted Chinese history?
So the mandate of heaven was the idea that a ruler's right to rule was granted by heaven,
Okay.
a divine force that ensured cosmic order and balance.
Right.
If a ruler was just and benevolent, heaven would bestow its blessings and the dynasty would prosper. However, if a ruler was corrupt or incompetent, heaven would withdraw its mandate,
Right.
leading to natural disasters, rebellions, and ultimately the downfall of the dynasty.
That's a powerful idea.
It is.
It essentially gave the people a justification for rebelling against a ruler who was seen as having lost the favor of heaven.
Exactly. It created a system of accountability, at least in theory.
Right.
Of course, in practice, it was often manipulated by those seeking to seize power.
Right, of course.
But the idea of the mandate of heaven had a profound impact on Chinese political thought
Yeah.
and helped to legitimize the cyclical nature of dynastic rule.
So after the Tang dynasty collapses, we're back to fragmentation and conflict, right?
Yeah, China entered another period of division known as the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period,
Okay.
lasting from 907 to 960 CE.
Wow.
So think rapid successions of short-lived dynasties,
Okay.
regional warlords vying for control,
Right.
shifting alliances. It was a time of political instability, but it also saw continued economic and cultural development in certain regions.
It seems like no matter how many times China was unified, it always eventually fractured again.
It's true.
It makes you wonder if this cycle is somehow embedded in Chinese history,
Yeah.
or if it's just a coincidence.
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
Some historians argue that China's vast size and diverse geography make it inherently difficult to govern centrally.
Right.
Others point to cultural factors,
Okay.
like the emphasis on family and regional ties,
Yeah.
which can sometimes undermine national unity.
So it might be a combination of geographic, political, and cultural factors
Right.
that contribute to this pattern.
Yeah.
What happens next? Does another dynasty manage to reunify China?
Well, you'll have to wait till part 2 to find out.
Oh, come on.
All right, we'll see you in part 2.
Okay, see you then.
So yeah, another dynasty does manage to reunify China.
Okay, tell me about it.
This is the Song dynasty.
Okay.
They ruled from 960 to 1279 CE.
Okay.
Now they're known for their economic and cultural advancements, but they weren't as militarily powerful as some of the earlier dynasties.
Interesting. So did they face a lot of conflict?
They did. They constantly faced threats from nomadic groups in the north,
Okay.
like the Jurchens and the Mongols.
Got it. And how do they deal with these threats?
Well, sometimes through diplomacy,
Okay.
sometimes through military force,
Right.
and they even resorted to paying tribute to some of these groups to maintain peace.
So it sounds like they were playing a delicate balancing act.
Yeah, trying to maintain their power and stability
Yeah.
while also dealing with these external
So
pressures.
they're more focused on internal development and stability than on, like, outward expansion.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They made significant advancements in things like agriculture, trade
Yeah.
technology, and the arts.
Hmm. I'm curious to hear more about these advancements. What were some of the key innovations during the Song Dynasty?
Well, I mean, they're credited with inventing gunpowder.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and developing the compass,
That's huge.
which had a major impact on navigation and trade.
Right? I mean, those are like game-changing inventions.
They were.
Okay, so they're making all this progress internally, but eventually, I'm guessing those external pressures became too much to handle.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Song dynasty eventually fell to the Mongols.
Oh, right. The Mongols, they were kind of a big deal, weren't they?
Yeah, they were led by Kublai Khan,
Okay.
who established the Yuan dynasty in 1279 CE.
The Yuan dynasty. So this is the first time that all of China was ruled by a foreign power, right?
Right. The Mongol conquests were brutal and far-reaching.
Yeah, I can imagine. How did the Chinese people react to being ruled by the Mongols?
Well, there was resistance,
Yeah.
but the Mongols were pretty effective at consolidating their power.
And how long did the Yuan dynasty last?
Less than a century.
Okay, so not
Right.
that long in the grand scheme of Chinese history.
No, and eventually they were overthrown by a rebellion that led to the establishment of the Ming dynasty.
The Ming dynasty. So we're back to native Chinese rule?
We are.
What were they like?
Well, the Ming dynasty ruled from 1368 to 1644 CE, and they're known for their efforts to restore traditional Chinese culture and values.
After a period of foreign rule.
Exactly.
So they were kind of like a back to basics movement.
Yeah, you could say that.
So what did they do specifically to restore Chinese culture?
Well, they revived Confucianism
Okay.
as the state ideology.
Okay.
They invested in education, and they also built impressive architectural wonders,
Like what?
like the Forbidden City.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's an iconic symbol of Chinese imperial power.
It is.
And the Great Wall, as we know it today, was mostly built during the Ming dynasty, right?
That's right.
So they were focused on solidifying their power and projecting an image of strength and stability.
Right. They also sponsored maritime expeditions.
Interesting. Tell me about those.
Well, they sent out these massive fleets,
Okay.
led by the explorer Xing,
Okay.
to explore the Indian Ocean and beyond.
Wow, so they were making their presence known on the world stage?
Yeah, these voyages were a testament to their naval capabilities and their desire to establish trade and diplomatic ties with distant lands.
That's amazing. It sounds like they were really pushing the boundaries of what was possible at the time.
They were, but despite these achievements,
Oh, here we go again.
the Ming dynasty also faced its share of challenges.
Okay, what kind of challenges?
Well, internal rebellions, economic problems,
Okay.
and the growing threat of a new power in the north. The Manchus.
The Manchus, this is where we get the Qing dynasty, right?
That's right. The Manchus were another nomadic group from the northeast.
Okay.
And they eventually conquered China in 1644, establishing the Qing dynasty.
So another period of foreign rule for China. How did the Manchus approach ruling such a vast and diverse empire?
Well, the Qing dynasty adopted a pragmatic approach.
Okay.
They retained many of the Ming administrative systems,
Okay.
and they even adopted some Chinese customs and traditions.
Interesting. So they weren't just trying to impose their own culture on the Chinese people.
No, they understood that to rule effectively, they needed to find some common ground.
That's pretty savvy strategy for a conquering force.
Yeah, and it actually worked pretty well for a while.
Okay, so tell me more about the Qing dynasty. How long did they rule and what were some of their major accomplishments?
Well, the Qing dynasty was the last imperial dynasty in China. They ruled from 1644 to 1912.
So that's almost 3 centuries.
It is.
Wow.
And during their reign, they expanded China's territory to its greatest extent.
Wow.
They also oversaw a period of relative peace and prosperity, especially in the 18th century.
So they were pretty successful by most measures.
They were, but like all dynasties, they eventually faced internal and external pressures that led to their decline.
Okay, let's talk about those pressures. What were the main factors that led to the downfall of the Qing dynasty?
Well, there were a number of factors.
Right.
One was the growing influence of Western powers,
Okay.
who were eager to trade with China,
Right.
but also wanted to impose their own terms.
I could see how that would lead to tension.
Yeah, this led to a series of conflicts like the Opium Wars.
Oh, yeah. The Opium Wars, those were a turning point in Chinese history, weren't they?
They were.
China's defeat in these wars really exposed the weaknesses of the Qing dynasty. and led to a loss of prestige and influence.
Yeah, and alongside these external pressures,
Right.
there were also growing internal problems like corruption,
Okay.
economic inequality, and social unrest.
So it was like a perfect storm of internal and external pressures
It was.
that ultimately led to the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1912
Right, and this marked the end of imperial rule in China.
and the beginning of a whole new era of turmoil and transformation.
Exactly. The Republican era was born out of this upheaval.
Okay, so we're entering the 20th century now. Things are about to get really interesting, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. This period is marked by political instability, civil war,
Okay.
and the rise of new ideologies like communism.
That's where we get Mao Zedong and the founding of the People's Republic of China, right?
Exactly, but that's a whole other deep dive.
Okay, fair enough. But before we move on, I have to ask about the Taiping Rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
This was a massive rebellion that took place in the mid-19th century.
It was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history.
Wow. Okay, tell me more about it. What caused it and what were the consequences?
Well, the Taiping Rebellion was led by Hong Xiuquan,
Okay.
who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ.
Whoa. Okay, so we've got a religious element here.
Yeah, and he called for the overthrow of the Qing dynasty
Right.
and the establishment of a new heavenly kingdom.
Wow, so it was a religious and political movement.
Yeah, and it gained a lot of support from people who were disillusioned with the Qing government.
Okay, so there was this widespread discontent that helped fuel the rebellion.
Right, and the rebellion lasted for 14 years,
Wow.
from 1850 to 1864.
And you said it was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history?
Yeah, estimates vary,
Right.
but tens of millions of people died.
Oh my gosh, that's just staggering.
Yeah.
It's hard to even fathom the scale of the devastation.
It was a truly horrific period in Chinese history.
So the Taiping Rebellion obviously had a huge impact on China, but what about the rest of the world? Did it have any international implications?
It did. It actually had a significant impact on global trade
Okay.
because it disrupted the production and flow of goods like silk and tea.
And I'm guessing it also drew the attention of Western powers who were already vying for influence in China.
Yeah, they saw an opportunity to intervene and further their own interests.
Right, so it was a major turning point, both domestically and internationally.
It was.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the earliest dynasties to the fall of the Qing dynasty and the tumultuous Republican era. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more key theme that's emerged throughout our conversation.
Okay.
And that's the idea of China's relationship with the outside world.
Right. Throughout its history, China has had this complex and often ambivalent relationship with other cultures and civilizations.
Right, sometimes they were open to trade and exchange.
Yeah.
Other times they were more isolationist.
Right. And this tension between openness and isolation has really shaped China's development.
Totally. And I think it's something that continues to influence their foreign policy even today.
I agree.
So as we move into the modern era and look at China's role in the 21st century, it's important to keep this historical context in mind.
Absolutely. Understanding China's past
Right.
is essential for understanding its present.
And its future.
Exactly. So we've talked about these cycles of unity and fragmentation.
Right.
You know, these powerful dynasties rising and falling.
Right.
But I think it's also really important to remember the human side of all of this, you know?
Yeah, what was it like?
What was it like for ordinary people
Yeah.
living through these tumultuous times?
Exactly.
That's something that's easy to overlook when we're just,
Yeah.
focused on like the grand narratives of empires and battles.
Right.
But behind those narratives
Yeah.
are countless individual stories of resilience, adaptation, and sometimes incredible courage.
I love that. Yeah, it's those personal stories that really bring history to life.
Absolutely.
Can you give me some examples?
Absolutely. Think about the farmers
Okay.
whose lives were just completely upended by war.
Right.
Forced to flee their lands,
Yeah.
start anew.
Right.
Or the merchants who had to navigate this shifting political landscape,
Yeah.
trying to maintain their businesses amidst chaos and uncertainty.
Yeah.
And of course, there were the soldiers.
Right.
Many of them conscripted,
Right.
fighting battles they didn't choose.
It's easy to forget that behind every historical event,
Yeah,
every battle, every political upheaval,
right.
there were real people whose lives were just profoundly affected by these events.
Exactly. And their experiences can offer us
Yeah.
a much deeper understanding of history.
Totally.
For example, Eternal Struggles talks about the role of women during wartime,
Okay.
which is often overlooked.
Right.
But, women played vital roles in supporting their families, communities, and even armies.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the legendary warrior Hua Mulan,
Yeah.
who disguised herself as a man to fight in her father's place.
Right.
I mean, her story is just such a powerful reminder of the strength and determination of women
Absolutely.
throughout Chinese history.
And it challenges the traditional narratives that often just focus solely on male perspectives.
Right.
By digging deeper into these individual stories, we get a more nuanced and complete picture of the past.
So we've got this cycle of conflict and reunification,
Yeah.
but there's also this incredible resilience
Yeah.
and adaptability on the part of the Chinese people.
That's right.
They found ways to survive,
Right.
to rebuild, to create art and culture, even amidst this chaos.
Exactly. And those traditions and cultural innovations often help to bind people together
Yeah.
to create a sense of shared identity and purpose, even when the political landscape was totally fractured.
I'm thinking of the development of Confucianism and Taoism.
Yeah.
During periods of real turmoil,
Right.
these philosophies offered people guidance and meaning
Absolutely.
in uncertain times.
Yeah. The spread of Buddhism during the tumultuous Six Dynasties period is another great example.
Oh, yeah.
These belief systems weren't just abstract ideas.
Right.
They provided comfort, solace, and a framework for understanding the world.
So even amidst conflict, there's this cultural innovation and exchange happening. It's like a testament to the enduring human spirit,
Yeah.
the drive to create and connect, even in the face of adversity.
And that brings us to another really important point.
Okay.
The interconnectedness of Chinese history. These conflicts weren't just isolated events. They had ripple effects that shaped everything from political systems to economic development to cultural expression.
Right. We can't understand modern China without understanding its long and complex history of conflict.
Exactly. And it's not just about battles and dynasties. It's about the cultural innovations, the philosophical debates, the individual stories of resilience and adaptation. All of these elements come together to create the rich tapestry of Chinese history.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the eternal struggles of China,
Right.
what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think first it's important to remember that China's history is cyclical.
Okay.
We see these recurring patterns of unity and fragmentation.
Right.
But each cycle also brings about new developments and transformations.
It's like a spiral, not just a circle.
Exactly.
There's progress and evolution happening.
Yeah.
Even as the broader patterns repeat themselves.
Absolutely. And second, we need to appreciate the interconnectedness of Chinese history.
Okay.
The conflicts, the cultural innovations, the philosophical ideas, they're all interwoven,
Right.
shaping each other and influencing the course of events.
And finally,
Yes.
we need to remember the human dimension of history,
Absolutely.
the individual stories
Yeah.
of those who lived through these times.
Right.
Their struggles, their resilience, their creativity.
Yes.
That's what truly brings the past to life.
It does.
Well, this has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Thank you for taking us on this deep dive into Chinese history.
You're welcome.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
It's been a fascinating exploration, and we hope you've gained a new appreciation for the complexities and nuances of this incredible civilization.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Let's see you then.